So yesterday we solved the issue that Scanner has where we tried to get mixed type variables. So we entered the name, then the age, and then the favorite color, and we had to create two different scanners, one for strings and one for numbers. Okay. Today we're going to look at a different kind of problem, and this problem actually is a problem that can happen with any program, not just programs that use Scanner. But let's go ahead and run this one more time so I can kind of show you what problem I'm talking about here. So I'm going to go ahead and enter my name, and then instead of putting in 40 here, I'm going to put in 40 that way. Okay. When I hit enter here, I get this problem. Okay. And so this is what we call a runtime error or runtime exception. And so this happens in our code because when I try to do numberReader.nextInt right here and it's reading 40, it doesn't know how to change 40, the word, to 40, the number. Okay? So let's go ahead and put some more notes in here. So it turns out that there are three types of errors in programming. The first one is a syntax error. Syntax errors happen when we basically are breaking the rules of the language. All right, so we've seen that before, like if I misspell class or I forget to have a semicolon, or let's say that I wanted to have first name here and I go something like that. Okay? So syntax errors are errors that we can see before we run the code. Okay, so our IDE, which stands for Integrated Development Environment, in other words, Eclipse, will catch syntax errors. Okay. So usually, what it'll do is it'll have a little red X there. We kind of talked about that previously. And then we just have to go to the lines where the errors are and try to fix them. So we have to say, oh, class should be CLASS. Okay. Over here, I forgot a semicolon. And if I was going to have this thing called first name, then I would do something like this. But I just want this thing called name, so I'm just going to put it like that. Okay? So those are syntax errors. The second type of error is what we call a logic error. And since we haven't really done anything with logic, I'm not going to get too much more into that. But basically what this is just a mistake that the programmer makes. Okay? And then the third type of error is the one that we're going to really talk about today, and that's called a runtime error. So that's an error that occurs while the program is running. There's a few more things we want to say about that. Okay, so first thing is we'll use what's called a try-catch block. Okay, to handle this type of error. And the last thing I'm going to say is Java calls runtime errors exceptions. So now let's put this into action. So what we saw a second ago was that when we typed in 40 here, we got what's called an input mismatch exception. So looking at the code that you have right here, which line do you think this input mismatch exception is happening in? Yeah, the age one, right? Line 25. Okay, so here in line 25, we're trying to declare int age and set it equal to numberReader.nextInt. So we're saying, go ahead and get me the next int, but then 40 becomes the thing that is next, and it can't turn it into an int, so we get this input mismatch exception. So we want to fix that. So yours may not be in line 25, but you can still kind of follow along with what we're going to do. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to say int age equals -1. Okay, and then I'm hitting enter a couple times so that numberReader.nextInt is on a different line. And then what we're going to do is we're going to tell the code to try, then put a French brace and hit enter. And now it's going to put in, for me, it automatically put in this closing brace. So hopefully it did that for you too. And now we're going to put in here that age is equal to numberReader.nextInt. Okay, so we got to do some more, but for right now, that's what we've done. And so what we're doing there is we're telling the program to try to get the age from the user, basically, like scan in the next int. So tries can't be by themselves, okay? Try requires a catch to happen after it, so that's why line 29 is an error. And so what we're going to do is go into line 29, hit enter, and then put catch, okay? And the thing that we're going to catch is an exception. So that's how you do that. You put catch, you put parentheses, you put exception, and then you give the exception a name, and I'm just going to call it E. And then outside of the parentheses, put a bracket or a French brace, hit enter, and it should automatically put in another brace for you. Okay? So now we've made that much of a change. And the way that this works is it's going to try to do this right here. All right? And if somebody does something goofy like types in 40 instead of a number, it's going to jump the code into this catch area so that we can say, okay, we've caught this exception that happens. Here's what we should do now. All right? And what we're going to do is we're going to basically give the user an error message. Okay? And that's going to look like this. So we're going to go system.err. That's what error messages are on. err.println. And the thing that we're going to print is going to be you didn't enter a number, so your age is -1. Okay, so we're just telling them you didn't do something right. Here's the result. All right, and guys, what I'm going to do is I'm going to surround that by print lines so that it's separated from the rest of the input and output. So we're going to go system.out.println above and below that. And I know that you guys are still kind of catching up to me, but I'm just going to run this again so that we can see kind of what happens this time. So I'm going to run it again. We're going to enter your name, okay? So I'm going to say my name is Waz, enter your age, 40, okay? And then I'm going to hit enter, and it tells me you didn't enter a number, so your age is -1, enter your favorite color, okay? And so what happens is when I enter 40, it again tries to do numberReader.nextInt, but it can't convert 40 to an int, so it jumps the code down here, prints a blank line, prints this error message, prints another blank line, and then just keeps going to enter a favorite color. Okay, so that's gold today. Was -1, favorite color is gold. Okay, I'm just going to type in some notes for you guys, and then we'll go through like another example, and that'll be it. So let's put in some notes here about what's going on here. So we use a try-catch block to handle runtime errors. Okay, so notice, like, runtime errors happen when the user does something that you wouldn't really expect. So I wouldn't really expect someone to type out their age like this. Okay, and that created what was called a mismatch, type mismatch error. Okay, or input mismatch error. Okay, so the way that this works is we try to run some code that might cause a runtime error. And I'm just going to say an exception. Okay. When the exception occurs, the code jumps to the catch block, and that code gets executed. And I'll just say, if the exception doesn't occur, then the catch code is skipped. So let's go ahead and just run this again. Okay, so this time I'm going to put in I'm going to put in 40, and I'm going to put in green. Okay, so notice what happened there. That time when I typed in 40, I typed in the number 40. It tried to do numberReader.nextInt, reads 40, stores it in the int age. No problem there. Just goes on to enter your favorite color. Okay, so the catch block got skipped that time because there was no exception that happened. Okay, and then it just prints out stuff as we would expect it to. Okay, so that error message is only going to happen when we get that type of exception. Now, speaking of type of exception, here we put an exception E. Okay, exception is like the catch-all. All right, if you kind of turn back the clock a little bit here, you would see that what we had in our error message was a java.util.input mismatch exception. Okay, and so it's better to put the specific type that you might get. So we're going to just change this right here to java.util.input mismatch exception. Okay, and I'm going to put a note out here that we can use exception E. And it's basically the only time we do that is if we don't know what type of exception we might get. Okay? So it's better to put the type, the specific type of exception, but you can get away with just putting exception.